We are now, I believe we are now live. Yes. Everything you say will be used against you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, September 12th, 2023 Washington County Board of Commissioners work session. Let's see. So far, this is Chair Catherine Harrington, and we have Commissioners Willie, Treese, and Phi, and hopefully Commissioner Rogers will join us. All righty, so today is just a work session day. So to kick us off, we have board and leadership communication. Who would like to go first? Looks like Commissioner Treese is at the ready.
I'm ready. Good morning. It was a busy week. A couple meetings I shared with other people at the table here. I had a Just Compassion meeting along with Commissioner Phi. We met with Vernon Baker and Ben Gates representing Just Compassion. They are continuing to work to build the new campus building. They're just shy of their funding, and they had some ideas on how the county can help. Commissioner Phi and I are following up, but we also talked about the fact that
This is down in Tigard.
yes.
Thank you.
Yes. We talked about the fact that we've already been participating, and so I tried to send the message that it was iffy. So that's where we were. I met with Tanya Steele. She's the owner of Lonell Farm. She's concerned about Ordinance 882 that's coming up, and she did have some interesting ideas that can help mitigate the impact on her property. And I've talked a bit to Stephen Roberts about that, but I'll continue to share the other ideas with him. We had the West Side Multimodal Infrastructure meeting. Is that their system? It's improvement. Thank you. Those I words. It was the fourth meeting of this group. It's intended to have 5 different scenarios for modeling. We only reviewed the first 3, and it's the last 2 that will have the biggest impact. That the last 2 look at the tunnel over Cornelius Pass, and then the 5th one is
tunnel over
tunnel under, or sorry, tunnel and overpass.
Just Cornelius Pass.
Stop there.
Yeah.
So it's the north side of the county, and then the last one is tolling. So those are the 2 that are the most impactful, and we didn't review those at this time. We looked through the lens of reliability, travel time, safety, and climate. So it was interesting to meet with the Brenda Finn from ODOT. It was interesting to meet with the other people. And I think it was actually, in reflection, I think it was smart to work through the first 3 scenarios as a group, just at a stop there, because we're going to be moving into the harder stuff. And I think it gave us some groundwork and some ability to work together first. So at first I was a little frustrated that we weren't looking at the whole picture, but in retrospect, I think it was better.
That would have been one heck of a long meeting.
Oh yeah.
All 5.
Oh yeah. It's just frustrating that it's taking a long time, but there's a lot of work that they're doing as well. I had lunch with Wendy Kroger. Actually, it was coffee with Wendy Kroger. She's a former board member of THPRD, and she is working with a group on Cooper Mountain issues, and wanted to talk about our position in relationship to, is it Metro Share? What?
Metro's local share. So good morning, Commissioner Rogers. You and Commissioner Rogers were not here for, I think it was our August 22nd meeting, a work session. And so we asked for that topic to come back so that we would have a full complement of the 5 of us. At that meeting, I had pitched the idea that rather than only providing $150,000 for the land acquisition, that we utilize an additional $850,000 to make it a $1 million contribution towards that land expansion.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to weigh in on that. So thank you for pushing it out. And I'm getting a lot of input, as I'm sure everyone is, from the THPRD membership. I also attended yesterday the swearing in ceremony. It was a bit shorter than it has been in the past. And that's probably due to our difficulty in recruiting people, but it was very meaningful. In fact, and Erin, can you help me with the fellow's name in the Mike Trotter? Thank you. Deputy Mike Trotter had requested, he's the deputy that was involved in the severe accident on Murray and TV Highway. Thank you. And so he had requested a piece of the vehicle, that he wanted to have a piece of the vehicle. And so they first came out with like the license plate type of thing and gave it to him. And that was very nice. And then from behind the curtain came the whole door from the passenger side of the vehicle. And it was just very, very touching to see the impact that this has on the entire Sheriff's Office community and how supportive they are. They do it with compassion and humor, and it was very cool. So, and I also had the opportunity to welcome everybody and give a brief talk. So it was very brief. Last night we had the Acre meeting. Catherine and I were at the Acre meeting. There was the agenda was really. We ended up focusing mostly on the bylaws and the work that we need to do in relationship to the bylaws. There are several issues that will eventually come back to our board here. It was a good discussion. It sometimes is tense in that room, and it got a little tense at different places, but we worked through that, and I was pleased about that. This week,
Related to that, as I think I have alluded to before, at our September 14th roundtable, I will be asking us as a board to identify what particular topics we would like to ask Acre for advisement on. Put your thinking caps on when you look at the September 14th packet.
which is
By the way, it's day after tomorrow, so
Yep.
don't think too long.
I would really like it to be out there further in time, but it is what it is.
So this week I have a coffee with Representative Bowman, ribbon cutting of the AFC Urgent Care Clinic in Cedar Mill, the MPAC Coordinating Committee, that's the group that we plan the agendas for MPAC, and RDPO Policy Committee meeting. That's my report.
Who else?
Go ahead, Nafisa.
Okay, yeah.
You can have Roy's 5 minutes because he's just going to talk about his vacation. Oh, I won't.
Don't worry, Commissioner Rogers. I won't take your 5 minutes.
All
And welcome back.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. This week or last week, I should say, some of my meetings, Commissioner Treese, you covered it very well. The Just Compassion, and I think the staff are following up, and look forward to what comes out of that good cause. I had a good meeting with Representative Ben Bowman, and that was really good. That was my first time meeting with him since he ran and got elected. So that was a really good way to recap what's happening at the state level and what he's working on and what we're working on. And he's really sorry he's going to miss the AOC district meeting.
Oh,
I
thank
wanted
you.
to communicate that to you, Chair, and he's meeting with you. So, and he said, let us know what you want us to bring forward. And just the meeting with Just Compassion, I had a great meeting. CPO6 had their full kickoff last week, and that was really a good meeting to attend. And people had a lot of questions about land use and transportation. So there's potential invitations to the land use and transportation group. But it was really good to be there and to see constituents and to just also hear a lot of concerns about Aloha Pod Village people had. And then this week, unfortunately, the TV Highway Steering Committee is also happening in Washington County. In fact, in this very room this week. I'm not going to be there because we have board commitments. Both are
On the 14th.
on the 14th, this Thursday. So I will be missing the steering committee, but staff will be there to represent us and to loop back on that, the TV Highway Steering Committee. And then one thing that I serendipitously or coincidentally got invited to was and it's exciting assessment or report that was done, and I'll just read it. The Ready Regional Kindergarten Readiness Network will be doing a series of presentations and dialogues to strengthen our collective efforts to provide Afrocentric care in early childhood, pre-post natal care for birthing people who identify as Black, African American, or African in the area of socio emotional health and screenings, which was interesting. And the reason why I highlight or elevate this issue is this was in collaboration between Clackamas County and Washington County's public health. So this is an interesting study, and I'll bring back to the board what I learned on Thursday in terms of what their findings are. So they'll be sharing the Black birth people needs assessment that was done by Dr. Roberta Hunt and LaFlawn Pistro in partnership with Clackamas County and Washington County's public health. Interesting studies and reports being conducted out there. So I happen to be available to attend to that, and I'll bring back to the, if there's any collaboration for our board or potential discussions. And other than that, oh, and I do have the Public Health Advisory Committee meeting this afternoon as well. So, and that's all my report. Wow, that was 4 minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Fye. Commissioner Rogers, welcome back.
Jonah, go ahead. Roy, I'm interested to hear about your vacation.
I won't say a whole lot. It's just, I picked up a bit of a cold, so if I slip this on, it's because I don't want any of you to.
Thank you.
Well, then I won't. For you, I just.
I had a COVID contact not too long ago, so I wore a mask last Tuesday.
Yeah, so touche on your.
Yeah, so I could totally relate to.
Yeah, don't lean in.
No, I know.
I got you enough.
I'm anxious for the next vaccines to come out.
I am too.
Mark that.
I'm ready for it too. I will simply say this about vacation. I mean, I could go on. Beautiful ship, beautiful amenities on it. The food was great. Takeaways. What we all deal with here is through a lens of today. If you take a different lens of yesterday, things have not changed a lot in some of these countries. It gives you a perspective that what we deal with sometimes is pretty small in comparison to generations before us. We were up in the Orkney Islands. In fact, that's where Pat's Sheriff Pat
Garrett?
Garrett, yeah, he told me that's where his family came from. And I was telling him about it's not Stonehenge, but it's a circle of rocks that were there before the pyramids. I mean, that's how old these things are. And you hear about people being forced off their land because somebody wanted it, just because it was more profitable for them. And so we think people here sometimes a bit insensitive. It's all over the world and all over. I got caught up in a demonstration, which I found very amusing, in Scotland, Edinburgh. Didn't know the Scottish flag, and this older couple was pulling out this flag, and I said, "What's that?" And he said, "What?" You know, his brogue, that's our Scottish flag. And I go, "Oh, hi." So we talked for a minute. I said, "What are you guys all doing?" He said, "We're going to have a demonstration. They want to be free from England." Yeah. And I've never seen any demonstration like that before. It was people in ties, and they were dressed nicely, and families and strollers and people of all ages, and very sincere. They had a lot of police presence, TV cameras, but very peaceful, but not unlike I think what you see in other protests, but in here sometimes we see violence. I see violence. Very civilized, you're saying that's not what we want. So anyway, great. I have a ton of pictures. I'm not gonna bore any of them with you. I have a couple of brochures for you that you asked me for.
Thank you.
I now come back to the reality of the Good Neighbor Center, and we've been getting tons of information and emails, plus the 882, and my only big issue there is how it's going to, well, each one of those, we help them out, which I think we should. Full disclosure, I was there when we did the original Good Neighbor Center. It was called something different in those days. Needed facility. Just, we want, anything we do, we want to sustain it. Can't just give people money to go out of business. So that's my 2 cents. In regard to the 882, we just have to get Tiger over to Shoals Ferry somehow. I don't care about the extension, but there has to be some way out of there. It can't just be Roy Rogers Road because it's congested and up at that corner. So there has to be some other way out. But anyway, come back and with your smiling faces, and thank you for all the hard work you do. And 1,000 years from now, nobody will remember you, but that's okay.
That's my goal. That's my goal.
Probably,
1,000
Probably
probably
four
5
generations from
Yeah.
now.
5 years, probably 5
Say
years.
next week.
Welcome back, Commissioner Rogers.
Okay, so I was, the WCVA is going through a strategic plan, so they'd hired a consultant, so I interviewed with him and just gave him some thoughts on tourism in Washington County. Was in on the first round of the GR interviews, so moving ahead on that, we have some great opportunities there, some good promising candidates. Had the Fair Board meeting. Fair had 10 days of not perfect weather, but 7 of them were perfect. And we had a few days that was a little warm, but I tell you, compared to last year and the year before that, no, this was very good. We had a significant increase in 4-H participation again this year. So Alan Taggart is doing a great job working with those kids. Taggart, they did expand the hours a little bit to facilitate, people wanted to stay there longer at night. So, they were closing it down at midnight, I think, and having to kind of shoo people out of there at midnight. So they were certainly enjoying it. And we've got a couple of things going on with just looking at some policies, the biosecurity policy, getting a refresh on that. And then how we can get a little bit better livestock participation. And so, that'll be coming about. We got the financials, but it's very hard to see what our fair does in a one particular snapshot because we overlap fiscal years. So I'm working on kind of bifurcating those two, the 22 fair and the 23 fair, and see if we can do that. Won't know that until probably October. I think probably the biggest thing that I was working on in the last week or so is 2 meetings with the Board of Forestry. Well, one with the Board of Forestry and one yesterday with the governor's staff, and it's on the HCP. Catherine was set in on that meeting with me yesterday, but last week at the Board of Forestry meeting, there was a resolution that had been brought forward by the chair. And it had some controversial stuff in it. And so there was lots of testimony. Again, the counties are pushing back on the HCP, saying it's going to be very financially destructive to them. And I think I can give you some of that information. It's going to be impactful on us as well, but not nearly as much as Tillamook and Clatsop counties. And then just like us, a good portion of the money goes to special districts. So just to let you know who we share the money with. It's the Port of Portland, Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue, Forest Road RFPD, Tri-City RFPD, Gaston, Banks, Forest Grove, Vernonia, Alls, and Hillsborough School Districts, Northwest Regional ESD, and PCC. So we, our money goes a lot of different places, as does a lot of the other forestry money to the counties, and all of these special districts are going to be significantly impacted because the revenues are going to be probably 50%, maybe a little bit more, but it'll just depends on what the harvest is. And
How much
so
money are we talking about? I've never known that.
for us, we have
Can I give you some information to help tell that story?
Mhm.
Keep going, Commissioner Willie.
Well, our 5-year average, Roy, is $11.8 million.
Oh,
Now, of the 11.8, I think we get 15%. And the rest goes to the special districts. In contrast, Tillamook is 20 million a year average. Clatsop is $23 million a year average, and they have some of the same issues. Their public safety is impacted. So this is huge. So yesterday, went back to Salem because the governor has reached out and said, what can we do? So she has given us 3 questions that didn't really jive too well with the group. Yes, there's 15 counties impacted. And I think probably 10 of the 15 was represented in the room yesterday or on screen. Again, Catherine was there with not in Salem, but was in the meeting with me. And the governor has asked what's specifically our problem with the HCP. How much money would you need to solve the problem, or where should this money come from? And the resounding message to the governor was, you can't pay us off this way because you're only good for 2 years. And this is a 70-year HCP. So, and we need something that impacts us more than money because we're going to lose jobs. We've got 2 lumber mills in Western Washington County in District 4. When we lose those jobs, no matter how much money you get, you can't get the jobs back, and there's a domino effect. So that was a message that the governor's staff heard yesterday. It was different. They wanted us to give them a number, and we said, no, we're not giving you a number. We need you to change the HCP. So we'll see where that goes. Catherine, I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Well, first I want to say thank you for continuing to be our CFTLC rep. I am on this journey as a fellow traveler from the board because it involves money. We get money generally the county government of Washington County gets a small number of millions, whereas the large portion of the money that goes to the collection of Washington County goes to the special districts that Commissioner Willie mentioned. So I handed out 3 pages that you have, and I want to call your attention, and it's already been updated in the packet. I want to call your attention to the 2nd page of this one. No, the other one, Commissioner Treese. This is from last year's report. We get this every November. So over near the right-hand side, you see county share of revenue from Board of Forestry lands. This was the payout from last year, $61 million. And you can see I've numbered the top 6. So Clatsop County gets the majority, and their general fund gets a big chunk of that. Similarly with Tillamook. Then we follow with the entirety of Washington County, and I marked the top 6, and Lynn County would be in there too. I made a mistake in that. So what Commissioner Willie was referring to was the HCP. So over on the left-hand side, I wrote it in pencil. You can barely see it, but I put in a yellow line as well. That's what the HCP modeling has for the average million board feet of timber to be harvested under the HCP. So it's about what was harvested last year, but part of the HCP setting aside areas for those species, but providing that certainty for 50 to 70 years. And the staffer that CFTLC membership pays for did the calculations. And so the HCP takeouts for Washington County is expected to reduce our portion by 35%, which is one of the top 3 hits. But bigger hits for Clatsop County, almost 45%, and Tillamook, 38%. And their general funds are far more dependent upon this revenue than our county government general fund, but it's still dollars. I mean, that's a good minimum of 4+ FTE for us every single year, which is why I pay attention.
So your percentages that you're referring to are the revenue share, the drop in revenue share, correct? It was dollars, not board
Dollars.
fee.
Yeah.
Dollars.
Yeah, thank you.
And part of it's just different allocation.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out how.
But it's using the estimates of the HCP, and Brandon gave us a separate sheet on that. The third page I gave you was Board of Forest acres by county. There are 15 CFTLC counties. Oh, and I forgot to come back to, the HCP doesn't affect the acreage in Clackamas County, Klamath County. I don't know why, but it doesn't. So what you can see is in terms of the percent of acres, Tillamook has the highest at 310,000 acres, Clatsop 146,000. And then there are 6 counties that are in the double-digit thousands of board feet: Klamath, Washington, Lane, Lynn, Marion, and Lincoln. So that's 8 of the 15 have over 10,000 board feet. So that's the biggest collection of hits from the HCP. But every dollar does count. So the remaining 7 do have opinions and have every right to their opinion. So I thought, just listening to the 2 representatives from the state, from the governor's office, Jeff Huntington and Palmer Mason, Melissa Cribbins as well, pardon me, 3 of them. It was very interesting because the point of this meeting was for the county. The governor wanted to hear from the counties in terms of what might be workable. And it's like, wait a minute, you're forgetting that the state legislature keeps burdening us as it is. And now you want to take more revenue away to deal with the complexity of things that we're required to do. So really interesting. Commissioner Willie, I wasn't sure if the comment about Washington County was just totally in jest and a little levity, or if they're really surprised that you keep having a presence in all of this.
Yeah, I didn't get it either because, that's why I asked if I had an opportunity for rebuttal there,
Yeah.
but I think it was a little bit unjust, but I went up to him afterwards and it wasn't real jesting feel. So I don't know. There was
Okay.
something there.
So we'll follow up.
But it's the
maybe I'll
first
be
time
at
we've
the
been at the
retreat.
table for a long time.
So I just wanted to mention or come back to this and give you some more data in terms of why should we be spending any time on this, right? I really appreciated your going in person. It's all about money. And we are in a situation where the loss of any revenue really, really hurts. And also, Commissioner Treese and I are going to the AOC retreats down in Klamath in a week or so. So I wanted to make sure that I helped provide some of the context. And it's interesting I mean, PCC has their own government relations. Port of Portland has their own government relations. But collectively, all these fire districts and smaller school districts, we need to be their voice for the importance of this
I'm
revenue.
surprised they haven't weighed in because we reached out to them a couple of months ago and didn't get any response. But also Tillamook and Clatsop counties are neighbors. And there are coastal neighbors. And when they're going to be impacted like this, it's going to impact us. So
Yep.
Yeah.
So I also forwarded, related to AOC, but different, I'm continuing to be active relative to courthouse dollars and courthouse planning. So I attended the General Government and Revenue Steering Committee. I'm back on that train. But it had the benefit of providing us, the whole committee, further information on assessment and taxation. So it was really, I found it really helpful information about the lack of state funding. It's gone down from almost 50-50 down to about 30%, and it's trending to next year be 10%. Doesn't matter what the category is, it seems like there's less. And while I appreciate that our state legislators like the gold stars that they get for earmarks, they're underfunding all of the base. And so our foundation is crumbling, yet we're putting in some new special windows and doors and fancy trim on the house.
good analogy.
So, yeah. Also related to AOC, I wanted to highlight that Ms. Angie sent us all an email on Sunday. And I added to it yesterday and said I would bring it back up today. So Ms. Angie was highlighting that apparently AOC staff is hearing some mixed messages with regard to our fiscal state. But in fact, our county budget is strained and stretched. And I followed up to let you know that Commissioner Treese and I had a meeting again last week or the week before with AOC on our dues, and reiterated or re-highlighted to you that we all had signed on a letter to let AOC know that we couldn't afford to pay our full 2023 dues. We've heard that that will be a topic. Counties not paying their full dues, it will be a topic for the upcoming retreats. And the forming AOC dues ask for 2024 seems to be working towards a 3 to 5% increase to the 2023 dues. And I'm such a broken record. I feel like I've worn through the record already, the vinyl, in expressing that we couldn't afford the full 2023 dues. So I'm not sure how things will pencil out in paying a 3 to 5% on top of that.
So I'd just like to comment on this for a moment, because it's really hard to have these discussions with AOC. It's not where we want to be. It's not where I like to be. Sure, we'd like to be able to write a check, but that's not where we are. And we had agreed previously to that. So I'm asking for either your continued support or to make sure that there's a conversation, because I'm tired, frankly, and it's not fun. I'm not looking forward to the discussion that we're going to have this next week at AOC in regards to the due structure. It's really difficult to stand up to the opinion of counties around the state that we have more money than we do. So I'm just asking, and right now I'm not feeling like you all have our backs when we're there. I'll just be really frank about that. So it's not fun.
Yep, we've all had access to our full budget information for years and years. There is no hidden money. Yeah, sorry. On that theme of tired, over the last few weeks, I've been reviewing early information from staff in preparing that for you, and I'm kind of tired of it. So I'm glad it's coming to an end, at least a bunch of new things, and I'm going to be backing away from that role for a while.
Are we gonna come back to this dues issue? Or are we done?
Oh, no, you're right, because you shared a thought. I'm sorry. I just,
Clear if I bring this down. I'm not sure, Pam, we're not covering your back. I don't know where that came from, but I have always been consistent. You either pay the full dues or you evaluate whether you have a membership. That's where I've always been.
You evaluate what?
You evaluate its ROI on just any business decision. I either pay your dues if you say, here's my product cost. And I say, I can't afford that. If they want to reduce their cost, great. If they say, I don't want to reduce it, then you evaluate whether you buy it. A county our size, with our resources, what are we getting other than some niceties to be in the group? I understand, but we get to be part of the club. And I got some information from Chair yesterday, which I didn't have before, which I found interesting. That the associations, the various associations, they're not contingent upon this main dues conversation, which that takes a whole bunch of issues off the table. We're just talking about the main dues issue. What are we getting from AOC that we desperately have to have so that we go back and say, we leave or
well,
they need to reduce?
if I could interrupt
Yeah,
you,
please.
I thought that the perspective that you explained it yesterday wasn't how do we justify our dues, but rather AOC needs to take the
I would
position.
love them to do that, but from what I'm hearing, they're not doing that. They're simply saying, here's our dollar amount, take it or leave it. Just like any product or service you buy, if somebody says, here's my cost, you don't normally negotiate it. You either take it or you leave it. So I'm saying, when do you have the business discussion of saying, what are you providing that I have to have? Do we really need to be there? And if the answer is, yeah, we really need to be there, then we have the discussion, tell me what you're giving me to make my return on investment.
So when Commissioner Rogers and I had an email thread yesterday on this, the interesting line that I bolded and asked him to repeat today is, seems AOC should either reduce our dues or we look hard at the business case for belonging. So really it was about highlighting that AOC needs to do some work to really think about what value we as the major donors to the AOC resources are receiving.
Commissioner Rogers, first of all, I agree with you that, you take a look at what the value is and you make those decisions. But I'm several steps behind that in that what I'm uncomfortable with is the formula for the calculation of the dues in the very first place. So we've had ongoing discussions about this, and right now one of the issues on the table is part of the formula is assessed value. Right. And I pointed out in our discussion that assessed value includes our industrial sites. And it's like, well, okay, so we're going to get penalized for having an Intel here when in fact the benefit that Intel provides goes to all the other counties as well. But we're getting hit twice on that. There are things like that. So I'm not looking at the business proposition, at this point, I'm looking at the calculation of the membership dues in relationship to the whole. So I think that's the first step that we have to take. There's, in my estimation, and I believe in Catherine's as well, chairs as well, the calculation is screwy.
Yeah, but they're,
Yeah.
it's very clear. They have no stomach for that.
Well, I would disagree after the last discussion that we had. I'm just putting, but I say that, and every time I come away from a discussion, I think, well, maybe we've made some headway. Well, in fact, we did. So,
Can I-
so
Can I respond? Because I, first of all, I applaud you for the effort. You're digging, the ditch with a teaspoon, and the people are not really listening to you.
Exactly.
We had the same problem when Greg Milnoski was in your position. He came to me, said, "Well, I know you're an accountant, you know this stuff." I looked at what they were doing. I looked at, and I said, "Greg, unless they're willing to make some changes, unless they really are intent on having us as a member, I don't see that you can complain a lot. I mean, somebody can complain a whole bunch about fees, but somebody says, I'm setting them, that's what they are." So I said, if you can do it, and I applaud you, if anybody can do it, you can do it. But if I applaud you, if you can move them, they weren't there 4 years ago, maybe they're here today, and you're doing great.
So at this point, the leverage point that we have is either we look at this or we get into the discussion about the ROI. And I think that's a very different position than AOC has seen us before.
Would it be helpful if this board said that as clearly as you just said it, so that you have that hammer? I mean, because they didn't, Catherine just said something a moment ago that Greg said, and that was, they don't have the stomach nor the inclination to do it.
Right.
And if that's the case,
Until
you have
we
to say,
play that card.
yes. Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, you're
We
way.
have to be able to say
Either there's a
either we
reallocation or
say, this is what we can pay, and you want to take our right away to contribute, our voting right? Because that's that's the exchange that's going
Yes.
on, pay to play. Or we don't pay it at all because we don't get to vote. And okay, so they redistribute that pain to all the other counties.
the one thing I would like to point out, it's not just our money that is the leverage point. It's also the status that our GR department has provided in relationship to the legislature. I believe that that's a key.
Only the AOC legislative team recognizes that. None of the board.
Oh, none of the other counties do.
Right.
Yes, I don't,
That's very sad.
I don't disagree that not all counties do. I think some do.
Well, I think Multnomah and Clackamas do.
So I mean, I think that there's others as well. But anyway,
Interesting.
You don't hear it play out at a ledge committee, and you don't hear it play out at a board meeting. You're being very generous. Good for you.
okay, well, anyway, I'm just pointing out that there are different leverage points. So, in my mind,
So where are we at? I don't know, just to bring it to a close.
I think I'd be comfortable with the second letter. Would you, Catherine? If everybody,
Feel free to author it, and we better get it signed before we go into the retreats.
Tanya, you're the one that started us on this path. May I ask your opinion here? You didn't start us on it.
That's what I
sorry.
was trying to
Yeah,
respond.
no,
to,
I'm
but
sorry that we have started us on this path at both Catherine and myself, as well as the board. And you just sent a memo this week that helped remind us that we need to be maybe,
On the same page.
yes.
Consistently.
I am happy to work with your board staff assistants on drafting a letter for your consideration at a future board meeting. I will also know for your board's information, after I sent that email on Sunday afternoon, Gina immediately responded and she spoke to me on Sunday morning. And we talked about our budget and the structural challenges that we have. So this wasn't just a 1 year budget cut. We have structural issues that will take a multiple budget cycles for us to work through, and really underpinned the previous talking points that your board has given to AOC.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So I would like to move ahead with the second letter. Okay, Megan, or
And
you haven't commented.
we have a meeting next Tuesday. And that's where we should close on it. So we have it for the meeting on Friday.
I'd like to hear from both Jerry and Nafisa.
I'm happy to see weigh in on the letter.
I think it's just interesting to me that my comment when I met with Gina a couple months ago was, how do you put together a budget with that kind of an increase and not expect to get pushback? And couldn't get a real justification as to why the budget went up like that. But she held true to, no, we have to have that. Okay. I tend to prefer being a team player. But like you said, Roy, if we can't get there and if they don't have any inclination to move, then we don't. I think there may be a domino effect of this. And I don't know that they're taking that into consideration. So, yeah, I think we've had plenty of communication. We have communicated very clearly. You've done your homework on the formula and the problems with it. It's like now you just need to say, we're done, make your decision.
From my standpoint, I don't take a black and white approach of you pay the whole thing or you don't pay it all. Rather, we did a lot of work, or I did a lot of work to bring it to you previously, earlier in this year, and followed up with the second requested letter to them to explain the fuller context. And we heard nothing back. So it was a real surprise to me to hear that at first it sounded like Washington County's not paying full dues was the topic of the conversation. What I walked away with after the meeting Commissioner Treese and I had, which was for them to fulfill an obligation to get information to her from the special June meeting, was that they hadn't had the conversation at the executive committee level to get back to us. So they've decided to deal with the larger topic with the Ledge Committee and the Board of Directors at the retreat. And that's where I feel comfortable that we have to keep telling the story that our property taxes are only going to go up 3 to 4%, right?
Right.
If we're lucky.
If we're lucky.
So covering a 5% is hard. Message number one. Secondly, we couldn't pay the 2023 dues, so a 3 to 5% on top of 2023 dues, we can't pay. I think I delivered that message a second time at the meeting with Commissioner Treese last week. So I'll probably be delivering the message a third time next week unless we change the messages next Tuesday.
Can I say something? Where I'm black and white, we may
Yeah.
not be disagreement, is when I say we pay it all, we have to define what all is. Everyone who's been in business, somebody says, I can't pay that, you sharpen your pencil a little bit, and you
Yeah.
say, what can I afford to
Yeah.
pay? So they haven't done that. And then if they're going to do that, okay, we would have paid
Yeah.
all of it then.
Right.
Yeah, whatever they're all, but if
Yeah.
they're all more than we can pay,
The mistake they made is they didn't acknowledge that we paid a 4% increase this year.
that was pretty significant.
Yes, it was very.
I agree.
So I'd like to reiterate the purpose of the letter from my perspective, if that I'm going to ask staff to draft, is that we are in alignment on this.
Yeah.
That's what's important because the message is coming back at various levels that we are not in alignment. And that's the important factor for me. So I just want to be clear what the purpose of this letter would be.
So we're still trying to work it out. I think is where at least three of us, and I think four of us are at. I don't know if you have anything more you want to say, but
I
Commissioner.
think we've drawn the line in the sand and I think we've communicated clearly. And so now it's just to say, okay, it's up to you, AOC. What do you want to do?
Commissioner Fry, as Commissioner Treese mentioned, she'd like to hear from you.
No, yeah, I think I responded. I'll wait to see what the letter is. I do like the concept of paying to play. So what is the return of investment? I like that idea. My understanding when I had a conversation with Gina was this will be a topic at the strategic planning or the retreats, to come back and to say, what do we pay? So they haven't even decided what we're going to be, what the dues are or what they will be and what they will be offering. Because I think right before my meeting with her, we had a robust conversation here at this board. So I was able to actually open my notebook and just regurgitate a lot of the discussions that we had here in terms of the one pager of what do we get out from AOC, from legislatively, from otherwise. And she did say that she'll take it back to the steering or to the retreat. And I did let her know I wasn't able to come to the retreat. But look forward to getting that.
Well, it's not a retreat for all members anyway. It's only for ledge committee members
And board.
and board.
I don't know what it was. I did let her know I will not be there. So for that, I think it's okay to put a letter together so that you two will be in attendance, be prepared. But it might be ideal to wait as well to have that conversation. But I'll wait what the letter says, the content, and weigh in on if I feel comfortable then. We don't have money. That's, I think, clearly said.
All righty. Phew, lot going on there. That was everything for me.
Did you finish? Okay. I'm in on your update.
The Council Forest Trust Lands and Catherine, I'm certainly share enough information on that, so we're good.
And CFTLC dues are independent of AOC dues.
That's a good thing.
All righty. Are we ready to go on to, leadership communication? Thank you.
I will make this brief in the spirit of time. Just one great announcement. Washington County Public Health has successfully completed our rigorous review process to maintain national accreditation status through the Public Health Accreditation Board. In maintaining this accreditation status for another 5 years, Washington County Public Health has demonstrated that it meets quality standards and measures and has capacity to evolve and advance to continue improving public health for our community. Washington County Public Health is one of 373 health departments to achieve this accreditation. So this would not be possible without the dedicated team in public health and also the commitment of this board to public health. Thank
And that is out of 3,100 counties.
Wow.
Or is it 1,300? No, it's 3,100. I said,
Yeah.
Counties in the USA.
Yeah, it's significant.
Very cool.
Brad.
Good morning. I'll try to keep it brief too, but I do want to share with you on the ongoing opiate litigation settlement. Things continue to churn, and you may have seen that Kroger has offered a settlement too in the over $1 billion, and we're going to work to get a piece of that. Additionally, there's been a fair amount of questions about what you can appropriately expend opiate remediation dollars on. And And I had a conversation with a reporter from the Wall Street Journal this week regarding that. The National Association of City and County Health Officials kind of put me in contact with this reporter. And I shared what we're doing with the CAP facility, and she was very interested in that. And so, so I put her in touch with Kristen Burke, who's going to share more with her on that. So I think that's exciting, that people are looking at what we're doing as a national model.
If I could touch on a couple of things related to that. Commissioners, we've all received information in our inboxes that the construction planning for the CAT has moved along. Progressed is the word I was searching for. And unfortunately, with all of that work, the schedule for the opening is now further out in time. So rather than the residential intensive services building being opened the early in 2025, it will be later in 2025. But the good news is with all of this work, through these opioid settlements, as well as through our GR team efforts at the state and federal level, we're getting closer and closer to the full funding. Yay! I also want to acknowledge that Sheriff Garrett has delivered to us his retirement resignation letter, or his intent to retire letter, as of December 1st. So Mr. Anderson, if you could summarize for us, I believe there are two different avenues for us as the board to move forward with filling that gap. One being that we, the board, can choose to do an appointment, and that of course would need to be done publicly. And the Sheriff Garrett has provided a recommendation to us on that appointment. And since my individual thinking is, oh yes, let's go that route, I can't do justice to the second means as laid out through the combination of our charter, our code, and ORS. I think it's just leaving it open, but that's where you have to weigh in as the legal beagle.
So we're looking at it right now. We have a code provision that does describe the appointment process in chapter 3, I think. So we are researching that right now as Kim Stewart in our office is looking at that.
So it would be really wonderful, given that his announcement was delivered to us yesterday, to within the next 24 hours get a summary email from you, as well as to our communication team, so that if there's any inquiry from the media or from constituents, that there is a summary, reasonable explanation of what the options are.
Yes, of course.
Great. So we'll have to put that topic on our agenda for closing on which way we want to go. Thank you. Ms. Taniguchi Dennis, Clean Water Services.
Thank you, Chair Harrington, and good morning, Board of Clean Water Services. I want to first start out by welcoming the team from the City of Beaverton that's here to be presenting on item 3 with the Clean Water Services staff to give the board an update on the operating intergovernmental agreement. The teams are going to be ready so that our board can discuss the details of the IGA that's been under discussion at the October 11th board meeting. I'd like to bring Mark Jockers up to talk about the joint board and CWAC event on Thursday. There's a little bit of logistics because you'll be in your retreat over at the Durham facility, so you'll be nearby, but you'll probably want to be able to change. It's going to be 84 degrees right here, and you're going to be on the river. So
yes. I'm not going on the water.
With that, Mark.
I am.
We show of hands.
I'll
up.
sit on the
So,
dock.
thank you, Chair and members of our board. Yes, we are meeting with, this Clean Water Services Advisory Commission. Director Phi wanted us to do that again, and I'm very happy to do it again. On Thursday, after your meeting, you're going to be at our conference center, Clean Water Services Durham Conference Center that afternoon. We are going to try to start right at 5 to have dinner and be able to meet and spend some time with the advisory commission members. Talk a little bit on Riverside about how Clean Water Services works on management of flow in the river itself. Get a few words from Glenn Fee, who's the executive director of Riverkeepers, and then we'll get into the river about 6:30. Sun sets at 7:30, so we'll probably be out for about 45 minutes or an hour just in that area. And you're welcome to be dockside or in a canoe or a kayak or a stand-up paddleboard with or without your dog. So I'm not the one thing I would encourage you to do is if you do want to change between leaving the conference center and being at the picnic, if you're going to be, you know, put shorts on or Tivas or something like that, you can do that. So, any questions? Thank you.
Might as well stay up, Mark. You're on the next item.
So we're going to come back to item 2 later, since we have a time certain item for item 3. So we're going to go right to item 3 and then back to 2. So we're going to move on to update on draft operating intergovernmental agreement with City of Beaverton. Welcome. A few weeks ago, it was Hillsborough Day, and
Sorry, I
today
slowed down
it's
here.
Beaverton Day.
So I think we have them surrounded, Bob. And escape.
All right,
Thank
cool.
you.
That's what I was thinking more in my sheet.
Good morning, Chair and board members. And as the chair said, yes, last month we had a short update about the Hillsborough IGA, and this month we have our friends and partners from the city of Beaverton. I'm going to turn it over to them in a second, and they will introduce themselves. We are getting very, very close, working very hard on language in the IGAs. And as Diane said, we're going to get you both draft IGAs in time to review before your October 11th board learning session. So we're excited for that. So with that, I'm going to let Dan and start the process. So.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you for having us. My name is Dan Weinheimer. I'm the Assistant City Manager in Beaverton, and part of my portfolio is covering public works and community development. That's part of at least why I'm here. Moral support.
Welcome.
Hi, and I'm Jeff Hunsaker. I'm the city engineer for the city of Beaverton, and I do want to point out some of our other team members that have joined us today. We have Susan Cole and Tyler Spath from our finance department, and then Jocelyn Blake, our CIP program manager, who is also our more than adequate facilitator for the entire process through this that we've been doing for the last year or so.
I could add a little color. Clean Water Services has a CIP, has had, but we as Washington County are just putting together our first ever comprehensive CIP. And so we on the board have had the opportunity to learn. It's one thing to have your CIP and manage it over time. It's another thing to construct one brand new. So I feel like we're earning our CIP merit badges pretty darn well. So thank you for helping us on our journey and being great partners.
Of course.
Yay, Beaverton.
Right. So I don't know. I guess the next slide, please.
Oh, you guys have.
I'm changing it. Oh,
Control. Yes.
fancy. Awesome. All right, great. So I wanted to start this morning by sharing actually our city council's strategic goals and priorities that they have. And they're up here on the screen, but this IGA really ties into 3 of the strategic goals for us very well: good government, quality infrastructure, and environmental sustainability. I'd like to say it also helps with community wellness and fun, but there's very few of us that find sewer to be fun these days. So it's okay.
Not true, not true.
But while the strategic goals are meant to be much more foundational and long-term, our council priorities are set on 2-year windows, and they're meant to be more fluid over time with what the needs of the council are as the council changes or as the needs of our city changes. And while the IGA doesn't necessarily tie into any of these directly, it does really help us achieve those priorities, especially in things like safe streets or housing or good government. So Willie wanted to talk about that and how that all ties together as well. And why are we updating the IGA now? The current IGA we've had since 2004. It could have been re-upped for another 5 years. At that point, it would have had to have been renegotiated, but the city requested to do the renegotiation now. And why did we do that? There's been some changes at the city since 2004, obviously. A big one for us was the voter-approved creation of our Urban Renewal Agency. That's really put a major focus on redevelopment, especially in our downtown core for the last decade. And that takes a lot of time and resources and kind of special ways of doing things with working in the built environment when we're talking about infrastructure that already exists and redeveloping pieces at a time to make sure that it all works together efficiently. But outside of redevelopment, we also have our greenfield development as well. In 2015, the city annexed the South Cooper Mountain area, about 540 acres, and that's being built out right now. And the city is also looking at the expansion into Cooper Mountain. And we're doing a community plan and a utility infrastructure plan for that area right now. And that's an additional 1,200 acres north of that South Cooper Mountain area. But really the biggest change for us recently has been our city charter change, where we went from a strong mayor form of government to a council manager form of government. That's been a big change, obviously, for our city council, but also us as staff, as we've been focused more on an emphasis on our administrative processes and the details on how we do our work as we're being led by a city manager now. So why update it now? Ultimately, the city is looking for flexibility and autonomy within our partnerships to make sure that we're still able to meet those goals and priorities that our council sets, but also make sure that the goals of our partners are able to be met through our relationship. So staff kind of developed a negotiation framework, and we worked with our city council to get that approved as part of this process. And we really put our negotiation topics into 4 major buckets or categories. The first, the memorialization of operating and maintenance procedures. We've had a great operation and maintenance staff on both sides that have been doing a lot of things over the years to make us more efficient, like swapping out. This area is actually more efficient for us to maintain the pipes over here, and you can do the pipes over here, and we kind of do swaps. We do it also with like street sweeping in certain areas. And that's just been great work that's been done by our O&M teams for a long time. And we really want to memorialize that and get that into the IGA, that they have that ability to still do that with some checks and balances to make sure that it's staying a fair and equal trade. We also talked a lot about our operating procedures, and most of that didn't land in the IGA itself, but through our additional documents we have that speak to our relationship and how we work together. And an example that did end up in the IGA, though, is changing how we deal with disagreements and the step-by-step progression on that in the IGA. In the past, it kind of just said, if staff didn't agree, it kind of just went straight to the mayor and the chair. And it's like, well, we should have some more steps on there and through the process. We also talked about our development and engineering standards, and we worked a lot with Bob and his team to have alternative approaches be a way that we could handle meeting the development requirements in the permit while still being unique and flexible in how we can handle them in certain areas, like our downtown that's more of a built environment, and it's harder for us to go with the standard detention ponds and lighted facilities that we'd like to see in our greenfield areas. It's harder to do that sometimes in that built environment where we have limited land and opportunities. And so developing that alternative approaches has been big for us. And then lastly, we obviously wanted to look at rates and charges with just the idea that we just wanted everything to be fair and transparent between the two. Having regional fees or regional rates and local rates that are split out. So obviously we all pay the regional rate, but CWS I know is working through their rates and charges right now. And we are in agreement with the idea of a regional rate and then a local rate that's paid by the county residents and for the unincorporated areas, and then a local rate that's paid by Beaverton residents that we set for our areas. I'd also like to add that holistically right now in the city, our city manager is really asking us to look at fees and rates and charges as we deal with our own fiscal sustainability issues. And so making sure that we're getting recouped for services we provide as well has been a big part of this discussion. So even though we don't have the IGA signed yet, there actually has been a lot of great successes in our point of view up to this point. Really, the first is that development of a strong peer relationship. We've been having some lunches together. We've been having a lot of great meetings that have been actually kind of fun. You wouldn't expect an IGA discussion to be fun, but like we had a really good time working with each other and kind of had some infamous icebreaker questions that became kind of the talk of both sides. So that's been a big part of this. And really, we focused on that first before we really dove into all the topics. And I think that was great. We also feel a big success is CWS staff have a better understanding of some of the uniquely Beaverton issues. On the screen here, I kind of just threw up a quick Beaverton city limits, which you can kind of sort of see with the orange outline. And obviously our city limits are a bit bananas, is a good way to describe them. And this is actually from our stormwater master plan, and then all the black lines to the different stormwater basins that are in the city. So you can kind of see how the physical nature of the system and how gravity works, it just doesn't really like to agree with our boundaries. And so that's a big issue for us is as this infrastructure goes in and out of Washington County and Beaverton, and how do we work together for that? Another big success, again, with Bob and his team, we had a really strong communication and partnership during the recent update to the MPDES permit. We had some listening sessions where we were able to share some information with Bob and his team, kind of providing that more city perspective and how we think about things. And they were able to explain why certain things are the way they are in the permit. And I think that was a really great success and led to some changes in the permit that Bob really fought for, that I think is going to lead to that flexibility that we were talking about. And then the last one is just a clear definition of ownership and maintenance responsibility. The old IGA really only spoke to maintenance, and the new one is really going to speak to both ownership and maintenance. And it just makes it clear for us, especially as the system gets older. And really, we're to the point of having to do replacements of things, and the ownership's a big part of that replacement. Whereas, you know, it's kind of like, are you renting it, or who's really responsible for replacing these pipes? So that's been a big success. I think that we've gotten that cleared up. So progress, we've been meeting for over a year, and we've been drafting a whole new IGA since May with a smaller team from that. So it's been a long time, but it's all been good work. We're obviously here today presenting with you, and then we're asking CWS staff to come and present to our city council. They're going to be at a council meeting next week to share their perspective on this IDA renegotiation as well. Last update I had, we're kind of looking for end of the year, maybe for an adoption of the IGA by the board and our council. And then really the next step is just keep this continued strong partnership going. Don't lose the momentum that we've been building for the last year and a half or so. Keep working together, supporting each other, and looking for updates to the IGA as needed over time. So those that continued success can go on. And with that, thank you for listening.
Well, thank you very much for telling us more about this partnership and how the team's been working together. I'd like to turn the floor over to my colleagues to see if they have not only questions, but any comments they'd like to share. So, commissioners.
I'll start. Thank you for your great presentations, and nice to meet you both. My first time meeting you both. I really appreciated your presentation, and I had a sort of a quick question about the rates and charges comment you made, and just to check my own understanding, were you making that comment to say that to you make it the unincorporated rates charges to be similar to what the rates are for Beaverton residents? Is that the comment?
Well, I can speak to it from the city perspective, but I wouldn't want to speak for Clean Water Services staff or their process they've been going through for the rates. But essentially what we were looking for is we recognize there's a regional rate that needs to be charged. We're all sharing the treatment plants. A lot of the work that CWS does for the permitting, we all have to share paying Bob. But so that is a set rate that we obviously think should be spread out equally amongst everybody. But for the local service, the serving directly to the homes in the different areas, the city wants to have the flexibility to determine the level of service it wants to provide to its customers and develop a rate that allows us to do that. And we'd like CWS to develop a rate for the level of service they'd like to provide for unincorporated Washington County. So those two rates would be different. They would probably be similar, but I don't know exactly how similar because that's the idea. We would want to have it be a little bit tailored to what we are looking to provide based on what you all want to provide for your constituents, what we want to provide for ours.
Another way to say it is we're changing from the past practice where the Board of Clean Water Services would adopt a local rate and the cities then would add a surcharge on top of that. So it created sort of a little bit of confusion. So now it's Clean Water Services Board of Directors will adopt the regional rate and the local rate for the unincorporated cities and for the cities that we provide direct service to, which allows Beaverton to set their rate for their community. So it's a real positive step forward.
Yeah. Thank you for the comment. And my last comment is to the Clean Water Services team. When Hillsborough came here, they really also sing your praises of how intentional you are going into this process. And I sense that. So good job and congratulations. You really created a blueprint for future generations to how you embark on new endeavors. I know it was so. Congratulations and good job on all the relationship and the positive working relationship you're creating out there on this. And thank you for being here.
Other commissioners?
I just think this is a great relationship. We got to collaborate all the services together in the county. And so this is a great way to start. We've needed to do this for a long time. So congratulations.
I'm just kind of ditto to everybody here, but I do think that these aren't easy things to do, and these aren't easy things to work through, especially as you referenced the history of who owns what, who's renting what, whatever the situation is, and it's difficult to pull those things apart. So my hats off to all of you for the work you've done. So thank you.
My comments, this is only for me. I'd look at this very different, and I'm picking up on some of your comments because I think they're apropos. If I were king for the day and could do anything I wanted, I would take everything within your checkerboard. I don't think it's a checkerboard. You got the most erratic boundaries. Everything is within your urban growth boundary, and I'd turn all the services over to you for this sewer. We have the transmission lines, we have the plants, right? We do stormwater. And I'd say you set your own rates in there, you bill your own rates, you do what you need to do. Just as long as you don't impact our system badly, and we could do that through inspection, that you own the system in there, that you operate the system in there, that you operate the way that you feel is appropriate. If you're going to have an urban growth boundary and you're going to build that out, then you should be in control of the destiny. You can't raise your rates, you can't plan if you don't know what you're planning for and you're going to build out. I know it's very radical and I'm very different in that respect, but I think that the time has come for cities to be holistic in terms of their sewer operations. So you can do the inspections, you can own your own transmission lines other than to our big transmission line, and that you do the work that needs to be done to own your system. So that's where I would be ultimately. I see that in my term remaining the whole part, but I appreciate you kind of looking at that. don't give up those questions. I'm not looking at you because I like the questions you brought up. Who owns what? My methodology, you would, and you would inspect it, you would maintain it, you charge whatever rate you want to charge to make certain it works. Give us a fluent that's not somehow, bad that we have to deal with. You're not gonna put toxics and that sort of thing down there, but it's something that we can deal with. You bill the customers, you deal with it all. So that would be my dream someday for you. So, any comments?
Thank you. I think a lot has been worked towards with regard to your ideal, though by the end of 2025, maybe it isn't the full ideal that you described, Commissioner Rogers. We really appreciate having had the opportunity to hear from our two largest cities in this partnership and arrangement. One of the things that all of us as commissioners have had the opportunity to see and feel, no matter how long we've been elected officials, is that the jurisdictions and service districts within Washington County, even if they're just portions, do collaborate very well. And we have a deep respect for the fact that we have shared constituents. And we, the Board of Directors of Clean Water Services, have in our board meetings with our senior staff have helped ensure that we have a full and professional appreciation for each of our cities, their home rule charter, and really taking care of all the end customers. So thank you for doing that and modernizing the IGA, right? As you mentioned in your timeline slide from 2004 and the sort of the business of government changes that have gone on since. You may have, when you were presenting your negotiation framework slide, you perhaps weren't seeing as many head nods from all of us as with some of the other slides. And I think that's because we've gotten the high level from our staff in setting this project up, but we haven't seen anything beyond this presentation since. So the kind of things that you were describing as relatable examples, I can't quite relate to yet, but I will, and I know it's coming, and I'll get to enjoy the fruits of that labor in really the upcoming near term. So no problem at all. Don't be at all worried about that. And I also wanted to mention with regard to that previous slide on the update now, wearing our other hat, the Washington County Commissioner's hat, we need to continue the partnership because we need to update the UPAA. So whether that's something each of you or members of your team are involved with or others, you can carry that message back that, we've got to get to that. We're a bit out of date there. Not my hot potato, but it's yours. Thank you for catching it. Thank you for caring for the almost 100,000 households within the city of Beaverton, all of those businesses. And I know CWS has a more direct role with regard to the industrial customers, but that's another example of a full-on partnership, right? Because there's a lot to servicing those industrial businesses within the city that we don't do in either of the hats I may have on, but you do, and we need to have that in place. So, and I would be remiss if I also didn't mention, I'm a resident of the city of Beaverton, so I know I get those local services, and thank you very much. So But I know things have improved for the better over the decades of clean water services. And I know for the community, long after I'll be alive and in the city of Beaverton, as well as all of the cities of Washington County, we have something special here and we want to keep it going for future generations. So thank you to each of you, the wider team, for doing what you do. And that includes our clean water services staff. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Good job, Bob.
So Mark, would you like to come back up and we can take care of the Clean Water Advisory Commission recruitment update?
Thank you very much. And this should be pretty quick and straightforward.
Did you miss us in August at all?
Did I?
He
Of
was on
course.
vacation. In
Of course, he
August.
was.
Yes.
An extended leave, and now I'm back and refreshed. So it's nice to be back.
Sorry, I had to tease you about that.
I know that's good. It was nothing to tease about. It was very nice. So I sent a note to the board in early July that we had 3 positions on CWAC that were terming out. So we have 13 members there that are appointed by the board, and those terms expire on a rolling basis, so we don't lose everybody. So we have 3 people this year whose terms are expiring. So we went for recruitment on that, and it's an agricultural position, a business position, and the District 3 position. What with the agricultural, Alan Jesse was appointed midterm, so he served about 2 years, and he said, yes, I'd really like to continue to participate. Alex Pham, who is a business representative and is, I'm sorry, that's wrong. The business representative is Terry Song, and this would be Terry's 2nd term. And as you know, Terry is the chair of the commission as well as the chair, and he served as the chair of the budget committee this year. The final position is the District 3 representative, which is Mike McKillop. Mike has served on the commission for a very long time. He is on our budget committee. He said he'd be willing to serve 1 more term. And as move forward, those are the only 3 applicants we got, despite promotion through Joe's community connection piece and our other outreach pieces. So what we're asking is, if you're good with that, we would come back with a formal appointments meeting on the 26th.
Mike really has been a longtime contributor, and I think this lines up well so that when there's the new incoming District 3 commissioner, there will be the opportunity for that new commissioner to do an appointment and take advantage of new contacts there. Alan Jesse, I've had past experience with him through the Hillsborough Leadership training program, and great resource. And Terry, we've gotten to see in our budget committee meetings as well. So yeah, we have three solid contributors.
Well, thank you very much. We will be back for formal action on the 26th.
Great, thank you. And I know there are a bunch of topics that we're seeking advisement on from CWAC. So it'll be fun to have some informal time with them at the function this Thursday. Thanks, Commissioner Willie, for getting me anchored on this week versus it being sometime in the future. So it'll be fun to talk with them. And now we're going to switch to an entirely different subject, garbage.
That's right. Well, good morning, Chair Harrington, Board of County Commissioners. My name is Mira Samantal. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Health and Human Services. As the Chair said, we are here to talk about garbage, specifically an overview of Metro's garbage and recycling system facilities planning effort and any facility gaps within Washington County to ensure our community has equitable access to these essential services. So I will turn it over to our fantastic solid waste and recycling division manager, Tom Eggleston.
Thanks, Mira. Good morning, Chair Harrington, Board of Commissioners. As Mira mentioned, we're here today to chat about the Metro Garbage and Recycling Facility System Plan that is currently under development. You all received an email probably about a month ago with an invitation to a symposium on September 27th. It raised some really good questions, and we sent some information to your board, and your chair requested a work session on this topic. So we're here today to fulfill that request and talk about this facility system plan, and then discuss how we want to engage in the planning process and provide our input as staff and as your board members as well. So we'll get started. Quick overview of the agenda, the purpose and desired outcome we'll go over, our policy questions we're posing to facilitate this conversation, a little bit of background about the plan, an overview of some of the gaps that have been identified in the planning process and staff have been raising with Metro over the years. An overview of the scenarios that Metro has developed. I will give you a disclaimer that they have slightly changed since the initial draft scenarios that were provided to us.
They
The ones in
sold the Cornelius?
no, it's still on the table, but the initial scenarios that were shared at a regional waste advisory committee meeting in July are different than the ones you'll see on September 27th. And in the packet are the newer ones that you'll see on September 27th. So we're all working on the same playbook, not the old playbook.
Yeah, I jumped out of my skin when I didn't realize they were draft.
They'll still look basically the same. They just got different words.
Okay, well, let's see if I can stay in my chair today.
So we'll talk about the scenarios. I have a handout for all of you. So if you don't have it printed, we can pass those around. That's an overview of the scenarios themselves. And then we'll talk about providing feedback.
I need to step out for I'll be back.
So a quick overview of our purpose here and the desired outcome here. Our purpose is to provide your board an overview of the facility system plan development, review the identified gaps in the plan, and discuss engagement strategies to support our community. And our desired outcome is your board is updated on this planning effort. We identify those critical elements necessary to fill the gaps in Washington County, and we make sure that our community has equitable access. Our succinct policy questions are: what garbage and recycling facility gaps are the most critical to address to ensure Washington County community members have equitable access to essential services, and how should your board and staff advocate for a facility system plan that serves our community? So a little bit of background on the facility system plan. This plan is really focused on facilities that are transfer or intermediate solid waste facilities. So these are the places that our garbage trucks deliver recycling and solid waste to before they go to final disposal. So a transfer station is a place where they consolidate materials. They might segregate and sort materials, and then from there it goes to final disposal. This is one of the key roles Metro plays in our system in managing and regulating these intermediary facilities. This plan is intended to drive future investments that Metro is going to make over the next 20 years, including up to building new facilities potentially, or adding new services to existing facilities, or updating and identifying alternative ways to provide services through their regulatory authority or with local governments. The plan is going to really be guided by reducing waste through either infrastructure improvements, improving quality and access of services, and keeping services affordable is kind of their bulwark. An overview of the project. They have 5 stages in the project. The first stage is defining values and outcomes. That was conducted in the spring of 2022. Metro did some engagement work with community groups and their council to really identify values and outcomes for this plan. The second stage was to conduct a gap analysis. That was done through community engagement work. Commissioner Treese and I participated in a community engagement session last October to identify some of the gaps we are hearing in Washington County. They met with community groups. They also did a technical analysis on some gaps. And then they are now in stage 3, where they're choosing a preferred set of investments to address those gaps, and they're building these scenarios. So we have these 4 scenarios that have been developed as potential ways to address some of the gaps they've identified. Going from there will be a funding plan and metrics to track progress towards their goal. And then finally, they're planning to look into the spring of 2024 for Metro Council adoption of a plan. So getting to Washington County and some of the facility gaps in Washington County, and these echo true to what we've heard from our community, and we've been advocating to Metro for a long time. Affordable garbage and dry waste disposal is a significant gap in our community. We'll talk a little bit more about this one specifically and the second one. Accessible household hazardous waste disposal is another significant gap in our community. And then they've also identified that reuse outlets and mattress and building material reuse in particular are also things that we don't see much of on the west side. Most of that's consolidated in the Portland metro, again, east side of the Portland area. Zooming in on the HHW, which is our acronym for Household Hazardous Waste, you can see that there are 2 permanent facilities in the metro region that collect household hazardous waste from community members. Those facilities are in Northwest Portland, in the industrial area, co-located with Metro Central, and the other one is in Oregon City at Metro South.
They're those tiny orange dots.
Yeah.
I was gonna say.
I was like,
Yeah, we have to zoom in on that.
And you'll see the shading indicates how long it takes the average community member to get to one of these facilities. The darkest shade is over 25 minutes. I think it's safe to say that Washington County community members have a hard time accessing household hazardous waste disposal. They either have to drive to Oregon City or Northwest Portland. Metro has historically held community collection events in our community. Those took a pause during COVID and they've been slow to restart. I think we're going to see 4 to 6 this year in our community, and they serve about 250 vehicles an event. So we have been advocating for years to Metro that as a community of 600,000 community members, this is inadequate for our community. We think much of this household hazardous waste is probably sitting in garages or ending up in our solid waste system because it's being disposed of improperly.
In my garage.
Yeah. Got lots of, it's in my garage too. It's a long trip. The other area is facilities that accept garbage from the public is a major gap that we're seeing in the community. You do see that there's another dot on this map that was not on the HHW map, and that's the Forest Grove Transfer Station. So it is technically a location that community members can take garbage to as a self-haul, so a pickup truck or a trailer load. However, they have really high minimum charges, and we hear a lot from community members that the minimum charge is unacceptable and they don't want to pay $100 for their pickup truck load when they can drive to Metro Central and dump it for $45. So that's a barrier for affordability, and it becomes a barrier for access because then the whole west side of the region is basically required to drive into one of those Metro public facilities or pay the higher fees at that private facility in Forest Grove. I'd also note that the Forest Grove transfer station has maybe the highest or the second highest commercial rates in the region. And so there's some inequities in terms of our solid waste rate payers where our commercial trucks are dumping at tip fees that are quite a bit higher than the Metro tip fee. That goes into our rates and essentially disproportionately impacts the rates on the west side of the region as well.
Seeing, if I could just comment, seeing this map and the previous one through this presentation compared to previously, it does help me identify why the Metro Council has included in the scenarios the East Side service.
Yes, Gresham is another area. I hear from the Gresham manager all the time that, hey, us too, because we're loud in those meetings in Washington County, but the East Side has some needs as well in the Gresham area. So looking at the system facility plan scenarios, there's a lot in these, so I don't anticipate we're gonna be able to digest them all today, but hopefully we can get started and think about some of the areas we want to advocate the most on. The way the team came up with these is they identified those values and outcomes, which are included in your work session packet on the back of this overview flyer. So if you're interested in kind of understanding their framework, it's in there. They then did the gap analysis that we just talked about, and then they developed these scenarios as ways they could fill those gaps. And now we're at the point where they're assessing and discussing the implications of either one of those scenarios. Metro staff has told me that we should not be viewing these as absolutes. It's not you pick scenario 1, 2, or 3, but these scenarios are examples of how this facility system could be built out. And maybe there's elements of one that we like and elements of another that we like, and we want to highlight piece parts of those scenarios. We don't absolutely have to pick one or the other, I guess, in a sense, when we're advocating for our needs. So I did put this up on the slide, just kind of facilitate the walkthrough of these different scenarios, and I'll kind of talk through them, and you have them in front of you as well. Get to my stage here. So the first scenario is the baseline scenario. This is essentially a as status quo scenario, so not necessarily investing in any new facilities. Under this scenario, Metro would sell the Cornelius site. They would do facility improvements necessary to maintain Central and South, which there is some facility upgrades that would be needed there. And then would also be working to improve and purchase the RID patrol facility, which is in southeast Portland.
I would suggest that their scenario highlights also include a statement of continuing inadequate services in the dark blue areas. Because there is a scenario service cost and reputation cost that impacts the population. And that's one of the difficulties I have with their scenario highlight.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I think we could very confidently say for Washington County, this scenario does not fill any of our gaps.
Yep.
Yep.
So 20 more years of perpetuation. I've lived that situation as an elected official for almost 20 years.
The second scenario here is the full service scenario. This scenario really entails the build out of 2 additional full service transfer stations. So that is essentially a commercial facility, a public facility, a household hazardous waste facility. So under the full build out of this scenario, there would be 4 transfer stations. There would be the Central and South that exist today, the Cornelius site, and a new East facility. This scenario also includes a reuse component. There's a proposal for a reuse mall in Southwest Washington County or Southeast Washington County, the Southwest part of the region, and a reuse hub in the Clackamas County area. The details of what these offer are a little bit fuzzy still in terms of what is a reuse hub. There's some definitions on the back of the last page here that give us a little bit more insight into what it would be. We're told that a reuse mall, for example, could have a limited HHW component to it. So there could be a place for community members to bring household hazardous waste as well. So it's kind of the full build out model.
Like
Paint and pesticides and fuels and solvents and bug spray and propane cans, all that kind of stuff. The distributed scenario is the third model. This is kind of a distribution of mid-sized flexible facilities. Under this revised conceptual draft that we're looking at now, the Cornelius site is a full build out. So you'll see kind of on the right side, they have a table that shows what services would be offered at these facilities, and the Cornelius site is a full build out facility. A new Southwest facility that would kind of be a flexible facility for reuse, limited HHW and a retail space essentially. And then a new Clackamas, which would serve mostly commercial customers, I think on the Clackamas side, because Metro South is aging and running out of space, and a new East to fill some of those gaps over there as well.
Boy, I really have a preference to this one.
Yeah, I think this
More services, more people.
Still doesn't have HHW though.
So we have HHW at Cornelius site and
Yeah,
the new
it does.
Southwest.
Yeah.
Well,
New
Cornelius, sorry, thank
New
you.
Southwest?
Oh, it doesn't have it at New Southwest.
Yes, it does.
Limited HHW, I think. Yeah.
And some HHW materials.
I was looking at the full category.
So are we now in agreement?
Oh, I think it's the best.
I just said it's a preference.
Yeah, I think staff leans towards this one. If it was an absolute, and we had to pick one, this is probably where we would land as well. It seems the most reasonable. I will say one thing that's missing here that is really important is cost. We don't have an idea of what any of these scenarios cost and what that means to our ratepayers or what that means to who's paying those costs. And so that's a really big consideration when we're talking about these types of these plans. So Metro has told us they're working on the cost estimates, and hopefully we have more information at the symposium to consider cost, because if cost isn't an object, we want it all, right? But cost is an object. So I think that's something we need.
Well, and nothing's free.
Yeah.
We can throw it in the trash, but that's societal cost shifting.
Absolutely.
We just don't know who else is going to be paying that cost. All that crap that's in your garage, you could throw it away.
Yeah.
Right?
And someone could get injured by it getting compacted in a garbage truck. So.
Yeah.
Now, Yeah, I
I'm
agree.
not
I
suggesting
could do
you
that.
do that. But
It's the reason why
it's-
it's in my garage. It's stacking up
Yeah.
because I'm not gonna do that.
right, I mean, I moved, what, 4 years ago from one house to another. So it still feels pretty fresh, what we had to go through to do the downsize, to do the clean out after living there for 14 years. So,
We adopted a bunch of HHW from our previous homeowner when we recently moved.
Yeah.
oh, wow.
Lucky you. Can you
So-
tell, oh, I'm sorry, can you tell me the thought behind decommissioning, I guess, the Cornelius site?
It hasn't been built yet,
Yeah, so they own the
Well, they're not
property.
gonna Do it though.
right?
Yeah, but what, well, I wouldn't be decommission, wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Better way of saying it, yeah. Use the wrong word. Why would that?
So they own the property. It's a good question. I don't have, I know if I have a very clear answer. My understanding is when the Cornelius site is actually even part of the regional waste plan. They heard loud and clear when they were developing the regional waste plan. We need more services on the west side, and they included a goal to build out on the west side. I think when they started doing some real cost analysis and looking at what that's going to cost, they started to hear from the east side and said, whoa, I don't want to pay for a facility on the west side. And the Metro Council said, whoa, we need to think about this as a holistic system and not just one facility. So that's kind of brought us here. And the proposition of selling the west side facility is I think just that. It's a proposition. It's an option in their minds. I'd say in our minds, we would want that not to be an option, but I think that's where they're at.
And I don't have familiarity with some others, but when you have sites like that, never sell them. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to,
Yeah.
sites, it's just keep it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what they've been in Clackamas County. They were looking for property as well, and it was really difficult to find property. So
I have you were talking about the fact that cost was not mentioned on this. And I'm having trouble remembering, you talked about Forest Grove cost being at $100 and what was that for? And another location at $45?
yeah, so Forest Grove. So that when I'm thinking about the framework of a homeowner that's got a garage clean out, and you have a trailer load or a pickup truck load of garbage that you need to throw away. At the private facilities, so Forest Grove is a private facility owned by Waste Management. Those self-haul loads are challenging. The people don't know the in and outs. There's equipment moving around, so they tend to discourage self-haulers, and they usually do that through high minimum charges. So it's more of a facility that wants to be fed by commercial trucks and commercial loads. So at Forest Grove Transfer Station, my understanding is around $100 just to bring anything across to dump it into the dumpsters. At Metro, it's a public facility, so they really understand that they're the facility that serves the general public, and they kind of create a better pay structure that allows residents and community members to bring their solid waste in at more reasonable rates.
Thank you.
Isn't Hillsborough landfill probably from that same
It
price
is.
level as
It is.
Forest Grove?
Yeah. And we hear a lot. I think we just got a constituent email the other 2 weeks ago from somebody complaining about the minimum charges at Hillsborough landfill. And it's actually Walton Valley Waste Recovery that receives waste that we don't regulate, so we don't have control over the rates at the Hillsborough facility. And so it's a similar situation. Yes. The last model here is the no build model, the no build scenario. This one's a little interesting. This one, there's a proposal that they would meet their facility needs by regulating local governments to provide more and additional services. And some examples there are providing more curbside service and also requiring community members to have garbage service, which I don't know if that's necessarily solving our problem. And then also investing in private and existing facilities to provide more services. So for example, investing in and maybe requiring those private facilities to charge lower minimum fees and provide household hazardous waste collection at some of those privates. So using their regulatory authority and their investment power to kind of change and fill some of those gaps is what the proposal is on this one.
I think the explanation of this one that you gave is the most positive that I've heard. Otherwise, I'm a big fat no.
Yeah. And
Metro requires local governments to expand curbside collection services. And then they should put in Metro introduces requirements for all residents to have curbside garbage. Is way better than by increasing requirements on local governments. Right?
Mhm.
Because it's increasing metro requirements as needed for all customers. It just happens to go through local governments, but by saying I was a big fat no on that explanation with the draft scenarios.
Yeah.
In fact, I fired off an email to them saying you can do better.
Yeah.
Because it was such a non-starter for me, which was pretty startling given my prior history as a Metro counselor. I mean, it's just, that isn't a starting point. But it's all about making sure that there's a different program for the end customer to respond to, and that Metro is investing in the service points to work on that. And the local government part just happens to be a part of the ecosystem, but they're not trying to do us harm, which is what the way I interpret the other phraseology that they use.
Yeah.
Because they were taking aim, but for what? So thank you for helping me better understand that.
I think staff's perception on this one too is that, household hazardous waste is a unique waste stream, and that's one of our biggest concerns. And we don't really see how this can fill that gap. I guess if there's maybe some private facility investment and there's a location, but our experience has been that private facilities are not interested in serving the public the way the public facilities are. And so I think that's our biggest concern here too, is this doesn't necessarily fill our facility gap in our mind, in a sense, for places for folks to take things. And sometimes curbside service just doesn't, you do a garage clean out or you're moving, you need a place to take a large load of material, and the curb is not necessarily the best place for that oftentimes.
So I have a question at this point. Well, and it feeds to your next slide. So there is this symposium, and Metro has sent invitations out asking for elected official participation. And I'm wondering, how do we want to organize ourselves? We've got two seats that we're dealing with. One is our responsibility for the UUA customers, and the other is our county role in working with the cities and management of a useful county-wide system for the residents and businesses of Washington County. So I'm wondering, we could each tell you what either top three are, or if we have comments on three, narrowing it down, and figure out how messages are delivered both through staff participation at this symposium, but also one or more board members attending. So how do we sort through all that right now?
Yeah, it's a very good question. If I could make a suggestion, I think I like what you're saying is identifying what are your priorities and what maybe scenario fits those priorities the best. Staff would be happy to meet with, if two of you are attending the symposium, we'd be happy to meet ahead of time and talk about any talking points you would like staff to help develop in terms of the preferred scenario for the board, and then kind of go from there. I think there's also opportunities after that we could bring Metro here to hear directly from our board as well, if that's something that we're interested in.
Frankly, I think we have enough of our own work to do.
Okay.
That opportunity is always there, but I think we need to look at our own agenda first. So board members, from my perspective, the full service, the big question is cost. So it's a little hard for me, but it's in the mix for my top three. I think you might need a clean sheet of paper so that we all five of us can express ourselves, but then we come to a sixth, the board. The distributed one, for me, I have a preference towards this one because of the customer availability and the place mix. But this is just trending. The no build one, it's an actual alternative, but it has impacts, right? It doesn't address the facility gap as you talked about. Also, it could continue to have, or does continue to have, inadequate services in the blue areas, like the baseline, and Metro's going to have to own that for another 20 years. So, but it, compared to baseline, it does, from the sounds of it, does address some of the waste challenges that they're facing in their guiding principle of a focus on reducing waste through infrastructure improvements. I have no, just to finish from as one of 5, I have no preference about attending this myself. I just want to make sure that we are representing both of our roles. Other commissioners?
I guess my question is, I assume it's helpful if commissioners attend. Is that what you're? Okay.
I haven't thought of that day at the other retreat. But my comment would be, yeah, I think it's time for Metro to step up. You know, our county's fastest growing county, and we've got the least amount of services available for this. So if we truly want to incentivize and encourage recycling, Metro's got to take care of them. So I like the full service, but I understand there is value. So if we want to do baby steps, then we do distributed. But the no build and the baseline are not.
I'm going to say, I think it's important that we have an elected official there. And I just checked my calendar. I could attend. Catherine, how do you feel about having an elected person there?
Oh, I think we have to have at least one.
Okay.
But you have to be actively engaged and delivering a board position.
Oh, I'm
wearing
happy to
those
do
two
that.
hats, right? Versus just sitting there.
I'm comfortable with that. I've done it before.
Any other commissioner thoughts?
The only thing I would say, of course, we want the full bill, but you haven't really told us what the budget is. That's the problem. You know, which do you like? Well, I always like the thing that's the shiniest, and so how does one comment on that? I mean, that's where I'd started. I agreed with the comments that Jerry made. I mean, the no build that doesn't even make any sense. I agree that something has to be done in Washington County. The distributed, that to me is a step down only if there's not enough funds to do the full build out. So, I mean, it's always interesting when people say, what's your opinion? But I'm not going to give you all the information so you can solve the problem. What do you think? I think you're asking me to do something that's pretty dumb. Give me the information and we'll make a decision. But
I think the full service has the most service, most success in terms of reaching all 3 of their guiding principles, and the highest cost. Distributed has more service, doesn't have quite the full service, but it has more customer service, has additional cost, but I assume not as much as full service, and continues to meet all 3. The no build doesn't improve the dark blue customer delivery. It does have some cost, though maybe I assume not as much as the other two. And in terms of meeting their 3 goals, it's progress, but doesn't fully achieve. Right. And then there's the do nothing, which is not acceptable. So.
Are they communicating anything about costs? Are they communicating, how much money do they have?
And that won't be before the symposium, correct?
I've been given indications that they're going to try to have a high level cost.
To be like $1 sign, $2 sign, $3 sign. I've been
How you
through
choose
this.
a restaurant.
No, we could do that.
Yeah.
Do that.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do here on Catherine's virtual whiteboard. Because you know that teeing of things up and getting a presentation of stuff for the Board of Commissioners, I kind of did that with solid waste at Metro for a long time. And it's still a very interesting space. For the funding, they have whatever reserves they have, but they also have revenue bonding with the regional system fee and so forth. So that revenue bonding capacity is how they have built other facilities, and it's what they would need to tap into with any of these scenarios. So it's a very sound model. So
It would be interesting. At our level, we think about solid waste collection and rate setting all the time, right? And it's like, if these bond payments, what does that mean for the monthly 32-gallon customer in unincorporated Washington County? That's kind of the framework we get to. It's going to take us a while to get that minute of financials, but I hope that we can have that at some point in this planning process.
I think one of the, I think we have a lot of consistency, at least from 3 of us, in terms of 3 that we've talked about. But I'm also hearing consistency that the do nothing is not acceptable. Those blue diagrams speak to that right there.
Thank you so much.
You bet. And to the degree that you want anything in summary beforehand, you know how to find us.
Thank you.
And I assume that we'll have a conversation before the 27th.
Connect.
And I don't know, I've had it on my calendar. I think I still have it on my calendar. So
Join the party.
we'll be there.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
You betcha. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Wow, we're not doing too badly here, Mr. Wheeler. I really had a faux pas with regard to John's last name recently. So I'm practicing Wheeler, Wheeler, Wheeler as many times as I can.
Right.
John Wheeler is our emergency management manager.
He has good initials. He has very
Yes.
good initials.
I haven't called him John Willie yet, so that's
That's
a
probably
thing.
good. He might take offense to that, so.
Well, welcome, John and Adrian. Thank you for being our subject matter experts. Please take it away.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I was thinking about changing my name, actually.
John Williams.
Well, yeah. Facilities probably whatever process. Good morning, Chair Harrington and board members. For the record, my name is John Wheeler. I'm the manager of Washington County Emergency Management, and joining me today is.
I'm Adrienne Donner. Today I am joining you as the supervisor for the Public Health Emergency Preparedness Program.
Yes, she wears other hats.
They know.
Yeah, we do.
Here, I'll take the
The Swiss Army knife of subject matter experts.
So we're glad to join you today. This is a timely
presentation since this is September is National Preparedness Month. This is our month to focus on community preparedness. And so it's a timely discussion for us today. Just to touch base with where we are at with the board's preparedness action plan, which you'll recall we developed after the board's roundtable in November of last year. As we continue to work on the board's general preparedness, we did the work session on February 28th, where we gave you an overview of the emergency management system in Washington County and our emergency management program. Our last engagement in May was to give you an overview of board emergency operations and understanding about the board's authorities, disaster declarations, and give you an overview of the board of the elected officials emergency operations guide as well. So we've covered the emergency management system, emergency operations. Today, we want to talk specifically about individual, family, and community disaster preparedness, which, as I've mentioned to you all before, is a very important part of our preparedness equation. And then forthcoming will be most likely an exercise activity that we're planning on doing for the board, which will serve as a capstone to the board's emergency action plan. We're currently planning on that being in first quarter, Q3, the third quarter of the fiscal year, to lead you through a training exercise activity.
Which is calendar quarter Q1.
Correct, yeah. Not sure what you prefer,
No,
fiscal
it's
or
great.
calendar.
Yeah,
so.
it's great.
But yeah, so putting the design and the plan on that together, and we hope to have an interesting and engaging activity for you for that capstone exercise that we'll do.
Can I interject something?
Certainly.
In parallel to this, I mentioned earlier during board communication that I am continuing my participation reluctantly in the General Government and Revenue Subcommittee, Steering Committee at AOC. And with courthouse planning, I pointed out during the presentation yesterday that the last comprehensive study of courthouses in Oregon, which was done in 2008. Okay, it was done in 2008. Well, guess what, folks? That was done before the Great East Japan earthquake of March 2011. And our assessment of the existing Washington County courthouse would be different after the Cascadia earthquake. So this touches on Rachel Fuller's portfolio and Aaron Calvert's portfolio and the facilities condition index and the capital improvement plan and our need to continue to press to participate in the AOC and statewide process for courthouse improvements and replacements so that we can achieve the planning money that is needed and go from there. So fingers crossed that we won't have any such event for decades. Yes. But I'm very much looking forward to that training exercise so that while we still have public health emergency on the brain with COVID, that we can experience that tabletop exercise for both Washington County and Clean Water Services. I know Diane is way ahead of us in this space.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So for discussion, presentation and discussion today is we will talk to you about what our key preparedness messages are to the community, and then we will talk to you about how we deliver those messages to the community, specifically looking at the resources that we have available to support the delivery of those messages, outreach and education. So what's the work that we do to do presentations and to do other outreach and education to our community to advance those key preparedness messages. And then we'll talk about organizing and capacity building. So looking at CERT, MRC, and other programs that we have in place in order to help spread the word about the importance of and how-tos of community disaster preparedness. preparedness. First of all, let's level set on exactly why preparedness is so important. Probably that's something that the board and many members of our community are very familiar with. Natural disasters and other types of disasters are an important and easily recognizable issue just in fact of life and living in the Pacific Northwest. As it stands now, just looking at the newspapers every day, just since August, we've had very serious disasters throughout the country and throughout the globe. Looking at the Moroccan earthquake, the flooding that's happening in the Mediterranean countries, the increasing frequency of wildfires that we're having in other countries and here in the United States and in the West. So it's apparent, obviously, that preparedness is important from the perspective just that we have disasters. It seems like they're happening with increasing frequency, and that climate change is presenting additional urgency to our risk factors as well. But beyond that, I think it's important to understand also that preparedness is an important part of our planning and preparedness process in local government at the state, regional, and local level. And so that's where it's really important for people to prepare, because we recognize that people are going to need to have some level of self-sufficiency, because there are limitations to what local government and regional and state government can do in order to meet all the needs for our community. It's going to take hours, potentially days, weeks, depending on the magnitude of the incident that we experience for local government and our partners to be able to respond to meet the needs of our community, which is why preparedness is so important. So response, we recognize that response organizations will be overwhelmed. Emergency services will be limited by infrastructure impacts, and an emergency response will also need to be prioritized as well. We'll need to deliver services in a prioritized fashion to provide the quickest services to those that are in greatest need. Infrastructure impacts, though, also may inhibit our ability to respond quickly to all the different areas of our community. Particularly a catastrophic disaster like an earthquake will degrade our ability to respond. Our firefighters, our police officers, and others themselves are vulnerable to the impacts of disaster and at home and in the workplace. And so another reason why it's important for our community to be prepared. And we don't have substantial reserve capacity across our public safety community to be able to meet more than sort of the common day-to-day incidents that we have occurring in our community. So it will take time for assistance to arrive. Again, like I said, that may be in smaller incidents, that may be hours. Other incidents, it may be days. And when we look at the more catastrophic incidents, such as an earthquake, it may even be weeks before we have enough resources that arrive in our community to be able to meet all the needs. And so individuals, families, and communities will likely need to be self-sufficient until help arrives. Getting into our key preparedness messages, the Red Cross years ago developed sort of the standard message template that a lot of us in the emergency management and in the preparedness education community use to inform our community about getting prepared. And that's the 3 steps of make a plan, build a kit, and be informed. Everything that we're going to talk about here in the course of this presentation is generally going to be in one of those categories of sort of the key messages that we try to get across to our community and to encourage and train on. And just to review those, just in the interest of time, I'll go through these fairly quickly because there are a lot of steps in the process. As far as making a plan, it's important to identify escape routes and for people to identify meeting locations. If they need to evacuate their house to a safe space, or if they're unable to return to their house because it's in a restricted area, they need to identify meeting locations to ensure they have a safe place to go to. They need to have emergency contacts. You need to have a plan for children, elderly parents, and pets. I think it's worth mentioning that National Preparedness Month this year, the focus of it is on preparedness for older adults. And that's certainly very important because older adults are often dependent upon caregivers. They use powered medical equipment. They have a higher level of medical care that they may need. And so we want to make sure that that older adults are taking steps that they need to take to be prepared, and they're establishing networks to support their preparedness. Gather essential information and records, medical records, and other things. Plan for power outages, evacuation, and reunification. And of course, make sure to practice your plan so that you're ready to put it into practice. So that's the aspect of making a plan. As far as building a kit, we encourage people to build up to where you have 1 gallon of water per day per person. More than that, if you have pets, that's a tall order because that can be a large amount of water to store on site. People need to have both an evacuation kit, meaning something that they can grab on the way out the door if they need to evacuate rapidly. And they also need to have supplies if they are stuck at home, if they don't have, they're unable to access services, or if they're isolated in the home and the store shelves are bare and resources aren't available through traditional means. So you need to have supplies for that too. People will need to work towards 2 weeks of preparedness. Some of you might remember that we used to say you needed to be prepared for 72 hours or 3 days. That's the old days. These days, particularly in recognition of the risk of the Cascadia subductions on earthquake, which could impact the entire West Coast or a large portion of the Pacific Northwest, we've identified that people may need to be self-sufficient for up to 14 days or 2 weeks. We recognize that's a tall order, which is why we say do your best to work towards a 2-week supply of materials. The twin bucket system is I won't go to it here in detail, but that's our novel solution to disaster sanitation in the unfortunate situation that the sewer systems that serve our communities fail following a disaster. And then, of course, to also get medications as well, and to reserve medications should you have a disruption in your source of pharmaceuticals. And then the last step of the process, be informed. Identify hazards and risks in your area. Perhaps most importantly, one of the things that we emphasize is that people sign up to receive emergency alerts. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but this is a very simple step that people can do. It just takes a couple of minutes. Go to publicalerts.org and register to receive targeted, customized emergency alerts to your community. We have about 50,000 people in Washington County who have signed up to receive emergency alerts. Unfortunately, that's only about 8% of the population. So we need more people who are opting in to register their email addresses and their phone numbers to receive text messages, and other messages to ensure that we have all the options available to be able to notify people in the event of emergency. As you've probably seen in some of the articles about the Maui wildfire and other incidents that have occurred, this is an enormous and very high risk issue around how we can effectively notify people, and an important step of that process is for people to opt in to receive emergency notifications.
Since it's not on this slide, and I don't see it anywhere, could you repeat that web address?
It's publicalerts.org, all one word, publicalerts.org, and that has a fairly simple portal for people to go to sign up to receive emergency alerts.
Thank you.
Know your nearest resources, get trained. We'll talk about different opportunities to get trained. And then we encourage the public to follow city, county, fire, police, and others on social media. Social media is such an excellent resource in spite of its limitations and challenges for day-to-day use. It's a great source of emergency information. for the public. So we encourage people to follow their local public safety agencies in the county to get the latest information about incidents that are occurring.
Just, John, if I could ask a question about that. There's a lot of social media, there's a lot of text and things like that. If you use the Lahaina fire as an example, though, they didn't have any kinds of cell service, did they?
Yes, you're correct in that the wildfire did impact some of their communications infrastructure, and unfortunately that happened and disrupted some of the notifications that went out. I know they're still doing some investigation of exactly what happened, but
so there is possibility that we wouldn't have the ability to get emergency texts or social media information. We'd kind of be back in the old times.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is a really critical issue that we've done a lot of planning and preparing for. I think the one comparison I'd make in the Pacific Northwest compared to the Maui community is that I have to give kudos to Portland General Electric in that they've done a lot of work to minimize the risks of wildfire starts resulting from their power infrastructure. So that's one of the thoughts around what was the cause of the Lahaina and the Maui wildfire was that they've done a lot of excellent work to minimize that risk. But also, though, one of the values of our alert and warning system is that it aggregates multiple different warning systems, including systems that use the TV and radio broadcasts, which aren't as reliant on communications infrastructure. And there are other networks and systems that are available as well.
But if we could dive down a little bit more on this point, Cascadia earthquake, cell towers, 4G. Let's do 4G separate from 5G. Are those cell towers going to survive the shaking?
I don't know the technical answer to that question. I know many, if not most cell towers have emergency power backup systems. I'm not exactly specifically aware of the vulnerability, and obviously those cell towers are all over our community, and some may be more vulnerable than others. However,
they're the big ones where we see multiple antennas hanging off of. But my concern with moving to 5G is that there will be more smaller antennas all around. And though while I haven't had any certified training, haven't yet had the opportunity to go through any table talks, what we heard from Diane and participating in the prior one that Dick Scouten was also there, all those electrical poles boom down, and a large majority of the smaller power poles boom down. And I'm concerned that that's where all these 5G companies are planning on hanging their equipment, given all the FCC lawsuits. So just sticking with the key preparedness messages, a lot of folks rely upon the internet for maps. Hard copy maps are hard to come by now. I think that's something we're going to have to figure out because I have kept my older maps from my kits, because if I can't get home on my usual routes, I'm going to need a map to figure out a circuitous route to get home. But I'm going to need a map to do that. Either that or just a huge leap of faith of keep heading east and go from there. Medications. It's, when people go get prescriptions filled now, you either get a 30-day or you get a 90-day. Keeping medications in a kit is really hard for most people. So yeah, I like the message, get your medications together, but that's really wicked hard. I just count myself lucky that I don't have to worry about that yet, but I'm sure my time will come. And on my last comment on those grids, I know to just wait until later slides. But I think we really need to assess there's people's normal everyday living today, and there's having the make a plan, build a kit, be informed, where we have to really think about, oh, it's not going to be normal. And how do we survive in the abnormal? And so it's almost like we need just the benefit of a high level summary for a Cascadia level earthquake, for a smaller earthquake. I don't know, where was it that had it was Morocco that just had a 6.8. Well, what if we have a 6, right? I hope we have something smaller before a Cascadia. Then there's another massive wildfire situation. We were really fortunate in, was it 2020, versus another ice storm and I think, and a flood. Those are the last scenarios. That's the summary of scenarios that I think you've trained this brain to keep in mind.
Yeah.
And to think about what that abnormal plan will be. What do I need to have in my kit for each of those possibilities?
Absolutely. Well said. And I think, some things to think about in that regard, which is we suggest that people think about the worst case scenario, which for a lot of us is, we think of as the Cascadia subduction zone event. And I think if you are ready for the Cascadia subduction zone event, that you're probably going to be ready for flood and wildfire and that kind of thing. I think it's also important, again, to think about those scenarios of if you need to evacuate quickly and have the materials that you need for that. And then to also think in terms of if you're stuck at home, 2 very different scenarios. But to be stuck at home and somewhat in an island without access to grocery stores, transportation systems, natural gas power, sewer, water, and that kind of thing. So I think a lot of preparedness can be done just by envisioning how you do that. And I think to your first point, a really important thing to think about is how do we prepare in a way that is completely independent of internet and networks, because so many of us, me included, have developed increasing independence on a lot of those systems. So those are just some things to think about. The one thing, as you can probably also tell in presenting the different steps of the process and having that discussion around the different things to think about when you're getting prepared for disasters, is that's a lot. There's a lot of things to do, and we have a lot of members of our community who are disaster vulnerable for various reasons. They're in underrepresented, underserved populations. There are people who are houseless, people with disabilities and other access and functional needs, people with low income, people with limited English proficiency, all factors which generally make them more vulnerable, but particularly make them disaster vulnerable. And we know from the incidents that we've had in Washington County with COVID and elsewhere that the disasters have disparate impacts upon those communities. And so the challenge is not only that they have disparate impacts, but it's also harder for those communities to prepare to go through these long lists of things to do, to get 2 weeks of supplies, to get water. And so that is something that we very much factor into our preparedness initiatives through the resources and the outreach and education and the capacity building that we do, is to address some of those limitations and to take strategies like finding out simple, efficient ways for people to prepare, encouraging people to develop networks, and establishing relationships and working through community-based organizations as well to help support preparedness for these vulnerable populations. So it's something we very much try to incorporate into our planning and preparedness outreach and education. So again, in talking about our community preparedness initiatives, we'll talk about resources that we have available, the outreach and education initiatives that we have, and then we'll talk about organizing and capacity building. In terms of resources, we, our main Washington County countywide resource is our take5tosurvive.com website. Our emergency management community has put in a lot of work on this project. This actually started the Take 5 to Survive program and campaign started actually back in the late 2000s, 2010 or so, I think is when the last iteration of our take5tosurvive.com website came out with all of its resources. We've done a substantial upgrade to that recently. We have 12 preparedness topics that are covered in that program in the 11 safe harbor languages within Washington County. A lot of people put in a lot of work. We learned a lot about how to do translations of the materials that we have in the course of doing that project, and are pretty proud of our take5tosurvive.com resource. I think also I'll mention that the Take 5 to Survive label came from the interest in doing short 5-minute activities that anybody can do at all income levels and all resource levels and capabilities, and still take substantial and meaningful steps to get prepared. On the Take 5 Survive website, we have an emergency preparedness community engagement catalog, which gives a pretty comprehensive summary of both the digital and the hard copy outreach and education publications and materials that we have. We're also pretty proud of our regional publicalerts.com website. This is hosted and maintained by the Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization. It's a very well curated site. It's comprehensive. It's very much customized to hazards in Oregon and the metro area in the Pacific Northwest. As mentioned, that's where people can go online to register for the Alerts system, as it's called in the state of Oregon. And it's also, yes.
The address is wrong.
.com or .org?
It's .org.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say?
It's up there as .com. Publicalerts.com
Oh, yeah.
is publicalerts.org. I just want to.
All right.
I've been.
Who's on your phone or connected? Check it out.
It
should be .org.
I was checking it.
Oh,
That's why I know.
Apologies.
So,
thank you for.
no, I just want to make sure that everybody does know it's .org.
The other one, the take5tosurvive.com, though, works.
Yes.
Yeah, that's correct. So that's the reason why I made the mistake.
That's right.
So
Earlier, because I got public alerts, wrote that down, but I was like, didn't listen carefully to hear the last part.
well, this will help cement it in everybody's minds.
That's right.
Publicalerts.org. Again, a very well curated set of information materials and other resources. I mentioned the Regional Water Providers Consortium. Most of the water providers in Washington County are members of that consortium, and one of its purposes is to do preparedness education around particularly the storage of water. It's got some great resources there to help people deal with the challenge of how they're going to store the water that they need in the event of an emergency. And then the last resource I'll mention is that we have in the region the RDPO's Disaster Messaging Work Group. This is one of the many work groups that are part of this Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization. And they've really done some exemplary work on a number of fronts, but one of the things I wanted to mention today is in the critical messaging project. They've basically taken and developed a catalog of preparedness messages that can both be used in advance of an emergency and during an emergency, and have put them into actually up to 20 different languages that are available to public educators and to the public in general to help make an extremely accessible and manageable resource for people who are looking to improve their preparedness. Outreach and education. In terms of the outreach that we do regularly, our small team will coordinate with public health, the Public Health Emergency Preparedness Program. We also work with the cities as well to look for opportunities where we can do outreach and education. We're just coming to the end of our summer community event season, and this up on the PowerPoint is a list of several of the activities that we did this year: National Nights Out, the Tiger Preparedness Fair, and so on down the list. We had some really great opportunities there now that a lot of these events are getting back into full swing following the COVID outage, and are really getting out there and finding that we are hearing from the public that's really interested in improving their preparedness and improving their preparedness of their families and their community. Great Oregon Shakeout is coming up October 19th at 10:19 a.m. The county and many of our partners will be doing a drop, cover, and hold drill. On that day, we take advantage of that every year to develop that muscle memory to make sure that we are ready, that when we feel the ground shake, that we're going to do the critical protective action of dropping, covering, and holding. Again, a very simple thing to do that doesn't take a lot of training, but that can provide a lot of protection and value.
Remember our board meeting in 2019? I was the only one that went under the desk. It was like, come on, you guys.
We can get to 100% this year. Okay. So as mentioned, this is National Preparedness Month, and we are doing a number of activities for National Preparedness Month. We're doing a weekly Horizons post every Wednesday, and we're doing some other things that we'll talk about here next year to support the preparedness of county employees and of the community. We do social media postings twice a month. Again, once a month or once a week during National Preparedness Month, we'll do a public posting. We also do newsletters, Washington County, and other newsletters to help provide information and education to our county staff as well to help support their community and individual preparedness.
I want to just say one of the things that helped me as an individual get prepared and really get hooked on it was way before I was a county commissioner at some Washington County function. Maybe it was a CCI meeting or a CPO meeting that was talking about Take 5 to Survive. I got a string bag from Washington County. It's currently in my office as part of my emergency kit. It has emergency on it. It's like neon green. And I know money is tight, but I just wanted to share how that got me started because it was something easy, transportable, very eye-catching, and I just put a map in, put a dry pair of socks, and started acquiring things. And I think as we move forward in the future years, working with our county partners, just put together a massive order of these bags that say in various languages, emergency preparedness. And, you know, whether it's the same slide of events for 24 or 25, give them away and help our community members start building that. I think it can go a long way towards helping people build towards their own self-sustaining, self-sufficiency that you talked about earlier.
Yeah, great idea. We do provide certain, giveaways, and things like that we and we'll talk about also our water distribution program and others. And that's your preparedness journey is not an uncommon start. There's usually some sort of initiating catalyst that helps sort of start people along the process of improving their preparedness. So great ideas. Anyway, I'll turn it over to Adrian to talk about.
So I'm going to kick off here and kind of jump over to the organizing and capacity building that we do, both in the community and within our county family. So public health emergency preparedness and emergency management partner heavily, as John said, especially in community outreach with way more requests than either one of our teams can do. So we do a little of give and take, who's available, is this in my priority bucket, is this in your priority bucket? We have a whole system. But we also do outreach and training. So in emergency preparedness in public health, we're trying to build capacity in the community, doing work with our community-based organization partners. For instance, we did a project this spring with Vienna Star, training their promotorists on how to do the first 5 curriculum, which we developed into a curriculum. And we trained them and in Spanish. That was very important as that is their primary language. And then they put on a preparedness fair for all of their Vienna Star residents to come and learn about all kinds of emergency preparedness. They had other resources there and we joined as well. And they did a fantastic job. And we just committed a few hours to training them, and now they can go forth and train. Our phase 2 with them is to teach them how to do CPR and first aid. So they'll be able to teach all of the folks in their apartment buildings as well. So it's really exciting for us. And because neither of our teams have huge capacity in human resources, being able to go out and build capacities in the community is really important. Back in EMS week, you learned a little bit about our CPR first aid initiative that we're doing with Centro, Virginia Garcia and Calo to get that same life-saving training capacity in those CBOs also. On the emergency management side, Alita Fitz is very engaged in our national private sector mass casualty impact and recovery seminar series. She's part of the core planning team with Oregon Emergency Management and national team members to get that training out to our private sector partners so that they can prepare and have their organizations and their staff more ready for all kinds of emergencies as well. If we bring it in-house now and talk a little bit about what we do to work with our staff within the county, which is important. And of course, they hear a whole lot of us in September, but we're doing lots of little stuff throughout the year as well. Continuity of operations planning is a huge piece of that, really bringing all the departments to a level where they know what they have to get back up and going as fast as possible and what can be left for later. As John said, it'll take us a while to ramp up after the big earthquake. So we need to know what's most important and what needs to be prioritized. During National Preparedness Month, we now, every year do a schedule of various trainings. So last week, we did a hybrid training using the Take 5 curriculum. And then I feel very comfortable saying we have an annual campaign. It happens every year. Now, for our emergency supplies, we have moved back to water again this year. Last year, we went on an adventure into food, which was very exciting, a whole lot less heavy than water, which was nice, but more complex. So we're back to water, and we had 92 people buy emergency water for a little bit more than 4 pallets of water, 427 cases. So that's exciting. And we're constantly looking, well, what's next? What are we going to do next year to kind of move it across the really essential emergency supplies like food and water. I do have to say a special thanks. We do this emergency management and public health emergency preparedness partner on this now. But we can't do it without finance, who does the payroll deductions, and of course without central services, who receives the pallets of water. And so they've been on board from the very beginning. It's really nice partnership. So in addition to what we do with our communities and with our staff, we also build capacities with our volunteer groups. So within public health, we house our Medical Reserve Corps volunteers. In Washington County, these are mostly licensed volunteers. We have a handful of supportive non-medical members, but the primary member is a licensed volunteer, like a nurse or a doctor. We're in a weird quiet year. Normally we have thousands of hours of various volunteer outreach and activities. Of course, during COVID, we had thousands and thousands of hours of volunteer activity in our COVID clinics as they supported lots of the clinics, including the Nike one, actively. And then we use our Medical Reserve Corps to augment our outreach and training. We have a core of them who are our CPR and first aid trainers now, which was an exciting project we did last year. And then they also go out to fairs and do smaller, more outreach type trainings like compressions only, teaching hands only CPR. And then finally, Medical Reserve Corps sits in a family of the Citizen Corps volunteers, which is a federal family of volunteers. The equivalent, I'm going to say non-medical, would be the community emergency response teams or our CERT teams, which I will pass back to John to talk about as they are at a city level.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, as it mentions here, 6 of our cities have active teams. Banks, I believe Banks, Tualatin, and Sherwood are recent cities to come on board in developing their initial CERT programs. The Citizen Emergency Response Team program has been around for several years now. And it provides over 20 hours of instruction to just general community members and how to respond to incidents in their community to meet, essential life-saving, essential life-saving activities, disaster first aid, search and rescue, personal preparedness, and that kind of thing. It's a very effective program. It's proven itself to be really effective. It also provides a core of volunteers that can support our efforts as well. We've used volunteers to support different types of response activities, shelters, cooling centers, and that kind of thing. So it's provided a really excellent volunteer workforce.
So you mentioned Sherwood, Banks, Tualatin. I know there's Beaverton and Tigard. Who's the 6th?
Hillsborough also has a program. Yeah.
I also would be interested to know, what does it take to get North Plains, Banks is already there, and Gaston, because they're more remote communities. Now they have fire districts, but still, what do we need to do to get those city councils to have, it may not be full CERT training, but yeah, I think partner with some other city search training, just as I know Beaverton and Tigard did, because I couldn't attend it the night of Beaverton, but as a Beaverton resident, they sent me over to Tigard for it. But just how to keep encouraging that.
Yeah, some of the cities do support people who want to do the training. I know Hillsborough and Beaverton have support people outside of their jurisdictional boundaries to come and do the training. Again, I know that Banks and some of these cities are still just taking the initial steps of developing their CERT programs. It is, as you can imagine, a fairly intensive effort. Half the effort is doing the initial training. The other half of the effort, of course, is maintaining and keeping your volunteers engaged as well, as you know. So, but always interested in looking for opportunities to enable that and foster the development of CERT teams around our community. So, I'll close out just with a summary here. As I mentioned, individual, family, and community preparedness is really, I think it's important for us all to recognize it as central to our emergency management program. We don't see it as something that is sort of a nice thing for our community to do. It's critical because in the first hours, days, possibly weeks, we're going to need to have a self-sufficient community that's going to meet the needs of their family, possibly the needs of their community, before they start to see substantial resources come in, particularly when we're responding to a more substantial incident like a major earthquake. As you can tell, we do a lot of collaboration. We have, I think, really excellent partnerships at the county, and regional and state level. these are really central and important parts of our program. We have excellent partnerships that are really trying to enable and foster and continuously improve the levels of community preparedness. But we need to continue to challenge ourselves, of course, to take steps to support CERT programs, to challenge our citizens, the members of our community to improve their preparedness, because we're going to really need them to have that if we're going to develop a fully resilient and community. So with that, are there any final questions or discussion?
Commissioners.
No, I just appreciate the work and the in-depth approach that you all take. So it's a lot of work, and it's so comprehensive. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well,
Anyone else?
You always make me scared, though.
What's that?
You always make me scared.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So it's all about taking that scare and
Action.
put it into action.
Yes.
So I'll do a wrap up here too. I really want to say thank you for working in this domain to help us be prepared as individuals, as an employer, and as a local government. There's a lot to it, and I continue to learn more and more every single time. So thank you. I was really impressed back when I started in 2019, and then the director of Records Assessment, Taxation and Elections, also known as A&T, or whatever it is now. That's how I remember it. Rich Hobenek, I think was his name, gave me a tour of the first floor and the second floor, particularly that half of the building. And I was really impressed. They had some items around posted in different locations, you know, a portable human carrier, not a full stretcher, and some other emergency type materials. And it reminded me of my Intel CERT team and Metro building CERT folks. And I don't know if we have empowered Ms. Angie and the facilities team to do that in our own buildings. But I really appreciated how, as a department manager, he had done some things with his team on that. Which also gets me to part of what we have to figure out as a board, as part of the Facility Condition Index and the SI and the CIP, is how do we come back to getting the Walnut Street facility seismically retrofit? Because that is one thing I learned being on RDPO and learning from Napa County with their earthquake, is that their public works department, aka Walnut Street, and the building permitting inspections and all the technology that is run out of our second and third floors was vital for the recovery part and figuring out what buildings were safe enough to go back into, and then other complications regarding the continuity of operations, right? They realized that all these employees, they couldn't get paid because all of a sudden the Napa County building was not suitable. So they had to immediately revamp in another office building so that the people who are out there doing the inspections and doing the work could get paid and things to move forward, and all the right records that were needed for FEMA after that first 2-week time period. What happened with their fairgrounds, and that was a whole learning experience. Oh, but that was on the wildfire in Napa County. Anyway, I appreciated on your summary slide, you talked about we need to challenge ourselves, our county colleagues, and our community to develop a preparedness culture. And this is where I'm really looking forward to our having that shared experience of the exercise. It will be successful simply because we're doing it. So don't worry, you will exceed our expectations because you'll have us do something that we haven't done before. And I feel confident that we, as 5 individuals, but also as the Board of Commissioners, we will learn more about how we can support our employees and also our organization to continue to do what it can to be prepared, but also in the face of support our community. So thank you.
Great. Thank you.
All righty then. We have gone through our full roster of morning topics. So at this juncture, we will take a pause for a lunch break and reconvene at 1 o'clock for the Capital Improvement Planning and Transportation CIP process updates. We'll see you back here at 1. Thank you.